thank you. I want to first of all thank you all for your willingness to join us this week following a busy holiday weekend. I had 29 people at our house with Thanksgiving, and finally pushed the last of them out the door on Saturday and scrambled to try and get ready to come here. This is a meeting that has been in the works for, I guess it was since right after the pandemic, and it's been just kind of, this thing would happen and it would fall apart, this thing would happen, it would fall apart. I'm delighted that we finally have been able to get things going. So you each, I think, have valuable things to contribute, and I'll talk a little bit more about the purpose of the meeting in a bit. But let's go ahead and run around the room for introductions. First of all, my name is Marty Draper. I've been retired now for about a year and a half. I was the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Programs and Director of the Ag Experiment Station at Kansas State University prior to my retirement. I'm a plant pathologist by training. Spent 10 years at NIFA as the National Program Leader for Plant Pathology and Integrated Pest Management, and was an extension guy before that. So when you saw me crawling around on the floor trying to figure out how to plug something in, it's that extension background that comes back to figure out how to fix this. So anyway, let's go around the room. You want to start off with that?
Sure. I'm Betsy Draper. Also retired from Kansas State University. I was the Deputy CIO of Strategic Planning and Enterprise Architecture. I also was at NIFA, where I worked in enterprise architecture and capital planning for the agency.
Betsy is actually a consultant, and she's working here gratis.
Oh, you'll pay.
Good morning, I'm Jillian Lang. I'm a development officer and plant pathologist with USAID. I'm just finishing my first month in that role. And so I spent almost 20 years at CSU as a graduate student, lab manager, plant pathologist by training, and really happy to be here.
I'm Jen Leach, and I'm a professor at Colorado State University, plant pathologist. That's all you need to know.
Shelby Fleischer, I'm an entomologist. I've been retired for about 2 years. It was a research extension appointment dealing with population dynamics and row crops and vegetable crops. A lot of extension, and some of my research dealt with changing climates.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tracy Lesky. I am a research entomologist with USDA ARS at the Appalachian Fruit Research Station in Kearneysville, West Virginia, where we work on temperate fruit production.
Morning, David Lane. I'm the evaluation specialist at the Northeastern IPM Center at Cornell University.
Hi, I'm Allison Gerken. I'm with USDA ARS as well, based out of Manhattan, Kansas, at the Center for Grain and Animal Health Research. And I study stored product insects and those that get into grain mostly.
Hi, good morning. I'm Karen Garrett at University of Florida. I'm in the plant pathology department and Global Food Systems Institute there.
Steve Young, the National Program Leader with USDA ARS in weeds and invasive pests. And I think many of you know, I used to be the director of the Northeast IPM Center.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Jeanette Thurston. I'm the executive director for Ag Innovation North Central, which is the regional association for state ag experiment station directors.
Jim Stack, professor of plant pathology at Kansas State University and director of one of the National Plant Diagnostic Network regions.
Good morning, I'm Jerry Haynes, and I'm also with the Northeast IPM Center, and I'm their program aide.
I'm Brittany Barker. I'm an assistant professor of research at Oregon State University, and I'm here with my colleague Glenn Coop, who's on Zoom. And so I do a lot of modeling and pest risk mapping.
Neil McRoberts. I'm a professor in the plant pathology department at UC Davis. I'm an epidemiologist. I work at the interaction between human behavior and plant disease management. And I'm also the Western Region Director of the National Plant Diagnostic Network.
Hi, Allison Smart. I'm from UMaine, and I am a diagnostician and the Executive Director of NPDN.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenica Allen. I am a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and one of the co-directors of the Northeast Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change Management Network. say that 5 times fast. My background is in plant ecology and quantitative ecology, and in my role as the co-director, I do a lot of what someone working in extension would also do with a different label.
Morning, Peter DeGennaro, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm a nematologist. That's it? Yeah.
Mike Hoffman, Professor Emeritus at Cornell University, been Professor Emeritus 4 years. Held multiple leadership roles, Associate Dean, Director of Experiment Station, Director of the IPM program, and now I dedicate all of my time to telling the climate change story through the foods we love and need.
Morning, I'm Jeff Dukes. I'm a plant community and ecosystem ecologist, and I'm based at Carnegie Science after having worked at universities for a couple decades. Carnegie Science is, well, our part of it is based on the Stanford University campus in California, and I'm feeling the time difference.
Hi, I'm Marty Williams. I'm a weed ecologist with USDA ARS in the Global Change and Photosynthesis Research Unit, and I'm co-located at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Why don't we jump to our online folks for introductions, because I skipped over you before and I apologize. Jeff?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Hickey. I'm from the University of Idaho. I'm in the Department of Earth and Spatial Sciences. I'm more of a forest ecologist, and I study forest insects in the Western US.
Your microphone working, Len? You're muted.
Oh, yeah, I didn't hear my name clearly, so I wasn't sure you called me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're coming through.
Oh, great. My name is Len Coop, and I'm at Oregon State University. I'm an associate professor of entomology, and I officially retired a year ago and been working part-time, which I plan to continue to do. Thanks.
A lot of us that fail at retirement. Kevin?
Hi, good morning. I'm Kevin Judd, the web administrator for the Northeastern IPM Center at Cornell.
And Caroline?
Good morning. My name's Carolyn Marshner. I work at Cornell University with Tony DiTommaso, who's a weed scientist, and our lab is working on weed management in a changing climate.
And Deb?
Good morning. I wish I could be with you. This is Deb Grantham. I'm the director of the Northeastern IPM Center. And I really thank all of you for participating in this. It's already pretty interesting. So I think it'll be a good 2 days. Thanks again.
I really want to give a shout out to Deb and to Jerry and to David and to Kevin from the Northeast IPM Center. So we joined together in putting this meeting together, making it work over here in DC to make it more convenient for folks that work in government. I'm not sure this would have happened without the collaboration between our project, the Tactical Sciences Coordination Network, and the Northeast IPM Center. So thank you very much. I think this is a great partnership and a good example of how we can get things done better together. One more person in the back room that joined us.
Yeah. Good morning, Kevin Morgan. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Health Security, the Health, Food, and Ag Resilience Directorate. Apologies for being late. I found out 10 o'clock last night. I needed to be here this morning, so I had to clear some schedule.
Very good. All right. So let's see where I'm at on my agenda. I think I'm supposed to get up and say something here. So I want to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are. And I need to share my screen here. Sure, let's do that. That went faster than I thought it would. So where did this thing come from? So the concept for this meeting came out of NIFA. It was actually initiated by NIFA. And they were looking for a way to try and get some guidance to them, some input from the scientific community on what they should be doing for the issue of how pests are interacting with the climate. And so I really want to emphasize that this has been a partnership between this grant-funded project, the Tactical Sciences Coordination Network, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and the Northeastern IPM Center. And Northeastern IPM Center, Deb was trying to think about what could she do to follow up on a meeting that had been held in 2016, 2017. And she talked to Steve Young, who said, hey, Marty Draper talked to me about it, so you guys ought to talk together. And it's been a good partnership through developing this program. So when we look at the last decade or so, maybe the last 2 decades, climate issues have certainly been on the radar. And so back in the Obama administration, 2011, there was a report that was put together through DCAST, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, to try and get some ideas about what the climate was doing. And you know, when you dig through that document, there's darn little that directly speaks to what we're concerned about. Pests in the crops that give us food, fiber, feed. Not directly mentioned. There's a few things in there. Talk about ecosystem changes and the emergence of diseases. They're not talking about plant diseases or plant pests. They're talking about the human side of this. This is something Jim Stack and I have talked about quite a lot, about One Health, and Doug mentions One Health, and where are plants and where is plant health in One Health? Well, they'll tell you, well, that's in the environment. Well, let me say everything's in the environment. And if people and animals are going to be lifted up, we should really think about those things that are green, that are the only reason we're able to live in this world. But they talk about altered habitat. Certainly that is a concern. Biodiversity change, niche invasion, human-induced genetic changes in disease vectors or pathogens, environmental contamination by infectious disease agents. And if you look at a little bit further in the document, there's an appendix that lists the federal ecological monitoring programs. Is there anything about what we care about? The closest thing that we really have in there, they mentioned 2 specific programs, the Forest Health Survey through the Forest Service and NEON, the National Ecological Observatory Network. Nothing that's directly looking at food, feed, fiber. National Invasive Species Council is never mentioned in the report. And in fact, that organization has been really neutered in the last 8 years. No agricultural pest monitoring programs were cited. Do we have anything that happens at the national level that the federal government endorses? Probably not. We have things that we do, but they're not directly something that's a national agency. It's been passed along to universities to serve that purpose, but it's not recognized in that report. Go on a little bit farther and we get to the meeting that Steve Young hosted at the National Academies in 2016. Doing much of what we're trying to do here, but we want to take it a step further and follow along and take into account the things that have happened over the last 8 years or so. Bringing this topic back to the surface. 2020, the global risks report that came from it's an insight report now. I can't remember who put it together. World Economic Forum. And when you take a look at there, I think one of the things that's really interesting is they have a diagram right near the front of the report that talks about what happens if there's climate action failure. And they really talk about the web of how everything fits together. And I think what's important to look at it about it is they talk about biodiversity loss. They talk about social instability, and they talk about food crisis. And I think in the 4 years since this report came out, we can see evidence of every one of those things happening already. So then where do we wind up? The USDA entertained a national climate change roadmap to be developed. And while we have Steve Young to talk a little bit about what happened with that 2016 project, we also have Jan Leach here to talk with us about the the National Climate Change Roadmap. And the question is, how do we marry those issues, dig a little deeper than what was in the National Climate Change Roadmap, and try and give some direction, some information to federal agencies on how we address these things that touch food, fiber, and feed. So it's what those next steps are. And I think we have to remember, as we're pulling together our final report here, that there's people's lives that are being impacted. It's about the economics of the whole situation. Certainly the climate is changing and pests are being affected. The ranges are changing, the profiles that we're looking at of pests are different, but it's producers and industries that are also being impacted, as well as those people that rely on the food, the fiber, and the feed. So we need to go to the next step and name those issues. So why are we here? I think it's established fact that climate is warming. In the political environment that we live in, it's not really important why. What's important is it is. And how do we deal with this problem that we have to have either adaptation and how we approach the problems, or we need to have other solutions that are coming. So the justification, I think, for some of this, and hopefully I'm not stealing anybody's thunder, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can look at the plant hardiness zones. And even in the years when I was working at USDA, and that's getting to be over about 10 years ago now, you could see that there were shifts in the USDA plant hardiness zones. And so I asked around and tried to get some justification for that. When I wrote the proposal for this project, I did note that it appeared that there was a 100-mile shift in zones in Kansas, and reached out to Chris Daly at Oregon State. He was unable to be here with us today, but he did go in to explain a little bit more about how you come to that point, looking at 5-degree half zone changes between the 2012 and the 2023 hardiness maps. And basically he's saying that we've got wide hardiness zones that indicate a greater distance where there are temperature changes that are more apparent. And so we see that happening in places like Kansas, where I was seeing that 100-mile change. In the plains, in areas that have less elevation difference, we might see in the mountainous areas of the country. But there are shifts that are occurring, and it's quite apparent through this map how we might see pests that can adapt to those areas as well as plants. And so Tactical Sciences Coordination Network is helping to lead this effort to come up with some guidance for NIPA. Why us? Well, let's just say that this program tries to bring together some of the more applied programs that have a longitudinal focus. By that, I mean they are not projects. They are programs that act over the longer term to try and address problems that we deal with on an everyday basis. From the plant side, that's going to be things like the National Plant Diagnostic Network. It's going to be things like our state IPM programs that receive some federal funding. It's going to be things like IR4 that make sure that there are products registered that can be used against pests in specialty crops or minor use applications. And when I look at what we are all doing in these programs, we like to think that we're talking about agricultural biosecurity. We like to think that we're talking about food and nutritional security. We like to think that we're talking about early detection and rapid response. But I would like to argue that what we're really talking about is national security. For the same reasons those things were pointed out about the food crisis, social instability, and biodiversity loss. So if you take a look at the programs that are in the Tactical Sciences grouping, we're really talking about how do we respond when a threat occurs. Moving from the threat to detection to diagnosis, response management, and recovery. And on the plant side of that of that equation, we're looking at NPDN and the IPM programs that are involved. We're looking at response through IR4 and communication to the public through ELAN. We see similar things on the animal side through the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, the Minor Use Animal Drug Program, the Food Avoidance Residue Database, RAD, and again, Eden with communication. So our interest lies down in these programs where the IPM centers live, where the extension IPM programs are Eden, IR4, and NPDN. So that's how we come together. And again, mentioning that we're already seeing these things happening. And so how we respond is really important. So what can we do out of this? We're going to get what comes out of this workshop pulled together into a report that will go to NIFA, and they will treat that as stakeholder input, as well as direction that comes directly through the report for a grant-funded project. We will publish this report to the scientific community through some avenue. I think maybe the Journal of IPM might be a good opportunity for us there. But possibly also we need to be looking at more general public audiences, because the more we can get this information out there to the broadest audience as possible, the best opportunity we have for it to do good. NIFA hopefully will be able to use this to inform their research priorities, but I think also the programs that are doing some of the ongoing work, like the regional IPM centers, the state IPM programs, can use this information to try and guide them in setting their priorities in their program. By doing that, they're going to be in better alignment with what NIFA wants, and hopefully they're going to be responding to where the needs are greatest. So what we're really going to try and do here is share and support our opinions through the scientific evidence in this report. And the question that really lays behind the whole thing is, can we actually influence federal and USDA priorities and policies? Well, I think that's our challenge, right? To come up with a compelling argument for what we have going on and why it's an important thing for us. So, any questions about why we're here? Yeah, sure.
Yes. Shelby Fleischer. Thank you. Now I have some sense of where we're going, but I have to challenge one comment you made.
Sure.
Where you said it's not important why climate is changing, and especially if it might just be a tiny subset of what comes out of this, but especially when it gets to communicating to the general public, I think it's critical that we say that it's anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that's causing climate change. I've been in settings where they tell me just ignore that. And sure, there's things we can do without talking about it, because we're not going to be influencing that directly. But I don't think in the long term, we can address this if we don't recognize that it's anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions.
I can't argue with that. I would just say that if we want this to have traction in the incoming government, we have to be careful how we approach that issue. That's my thought. I don't want this to be something that gets pushed aside because it's viewed as taking an opposing viewpoint to where the government wants to go. But I do think it has to be mentioned for sure. Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff Dukes. This is just a related point, maybe. I mean, one thing we're not, or you at least haven't put up on the board so far is the change in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere and the impact of that. You know, that's the driver of climate change, or one of the main drivers of climate change, and has its own set of effects, right? The CO2 concentration's gone up by what, 52% or so since pre-industrial, and that's affecting the nutrition in those crops directly. It's also affecting what the pests see when they think about eating those crops themselves or the trees or whatever. So I think that's really wrapped up in all of this, and it's inextricable from the anthropogenic climate change aspect of it. And I think we'd be remiss in not incorporating that factor into the overall network.
Along that line, I think it really speaks to the importance of forest pests. And so and Jeff speaks in a bit here. I think we can't forget that if we have that CO2 in the environment, we have to figure out how we're scrubbing it out of there, how we're absorbing it. And those forest pests and range are all very important in keeping the balance into this. So as we see decreasing land area that is forested or in prairie, we're losing some of that capacity.
Marty, just the question I have is just really about the time frame and sort of the life expectancy of these priorities, this document, what your vision is for that.
Time frame would be fast. My hope is that I can pull a draft of some of this together within the next 2 weeks and circulate it to the entire group for feedback. We'll put it up as a Google document for everybody to have the opportunity to edit and comment on. And that would be the initial report to NIFA. So I want to get that turned around as quickly as possible.
But my question is sort of how long do you think this document will be relevant to NIFA? To like, where are we going in terms of the time frame that we expect this document to represent? That's sort of, yeah.
My thought is I don't know that we can expect it to have relevance beyond the next RFA period.
Okay.
But hopefully it has legs that they will respect it for a longer period of time. I mean, they might walk in and say, we're not paying attention to that at all. So that's our challenge, to make sure that it's a compelling argument. But how long it will last, the people that asked this to be done are largely gone from the agency. So it's going to be program staff that's going to be responsible for carrying the message forward.
So how long, I'm sorry, I'm getting there, the coffee's kicking in slowly, so, how long?
Perhaps I need some too.
No, I'm trying to get my head around scientific relevancy. How long do you think it will be scientifically relevant?
Oh.
I finally got there, sorry.
That might be a question for our ecologists that are present. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with how we write those recommendations.
And that's kind
It's
of.
a rapidly changing scene.
So, yeah, so that's why I was asking. Sorry that it took so long.
But I think all those answers are relevant to our concerns and how we're going to respond. Yeah, I don't know how long this is going to be good, but I think if we write some of it in a general enough way, we can't focus on specific pests too much. They are examples for us.
Exactly.
Marty Williams, just to follow up on that idea, I think it should be written in such a way, I think at least in terms of the weeds, that they are in a better position to adapt to these environmental changes than our crops. So I feel like the message should have, we can craft this in a way that it has a message that carries well beyond whatever technological tools we have at the moment. But it's going to be an ongoing issue for decades and much longer to come.
And I think that's a really interesting point, because the weeds are going to adapt on their own. They're going to go where they can grow. And crops, we think we can tell them where to grow. And yet it is becoming less tenable for us to produce some of our crops in the areas that they have traditionally been grown. Kansas is not a great environment for wheat anymore. It's too darn hot. Jim Stack says, hush your mouth. How could you say that about this? But I mean, we're seeing that kind of thing happening, and what we have to have happen to respond to that is people to make the decision that they're going to grow something else, or that crop is going to shift into a new area. And that's a hard decision for people that have a large economic investment in that production system. Can we beat that with breeding in time? Can we keep up with it with breeding? I don't know. Yeah, Mike.
Mike Hoffman speaking. Marty, I want to go back to Shelby's comment about telling the truth. We're scientists. Climate change It's happening very fast. And despite the incoming administration, I think we need to be honest and lay it out there. And one can do that in a way that isn't controversial or judgmental or taking political sides. You just tell the story.
Well, there are facts. We have evidence-based science that has the facts that certainly CO2 is increasing in the environment. Nothing is a problem. I think the question becomes, how we tell the story.
And also, exactly, to make it as relevant as possible. Joe, you got to come back to your comment about the year 2100. A lot of smart people are saying this century before 2100, famine's going to increase, mass migration and conflict. We're not waiting for 2100. By then, the planet may not be very livable.
I don't want to move to the sun.
What's that?
I don't want to move to the sun. I'm not sure how livable it is now. Sorry, Jeanette, I know you're from Arizona.
Actually, I commented to Jim, I said, this is a bummer way to start my week.
Well, it's going to be better by the time we get to the end, and we have some ideas for what we want to share. What our solutions are going to be, our recommendations are going to be for those agencies.
Yeah, if I may. It's not a doom and gloom story unless you want it to be. But the antidote to despair is action, and that's why we're here.
I will tell you that Doug Steele mentioned the Ag Innovation Research Roadmap. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I can put a website so you can take a peek at it. It's still in draft form. But actually, we took that approach. We actually have the risks of inaction. So if we do not move in these areas, if we do not invest in these areas, and by the way, climate's one of them, here's what's going to happen. And so it's a different approach for us. We haven't taken that approach before, but I think I always think about my mom and dad at home. They need to hear about, here's the consequences if we don't do something.
So some of you may not be familiar with the term ag innovation. So ag innovation is a new umbrella term for the network of ag experiment stations. So it's the research side of the land grant system. And the thought was ag experiment station, correct me if I'm wrong, that ag experiment station terminology wasn't really resonating with Congress and the funding agencies. And so by trying to emphasize that really the research that's done at land grant universities is about innovation in agriculture.